Hi, and welcome to another episode of Emerald Isle Vacation Home Specialist. I am your host, Dennis Richkovsky. Some of you recognize me as the co-owner of Flip Flops Donuts, and some of you know me as your broker of real estate, specializing in waterfront and waterview properties along the Crystal Coast, as well as in my town of Emerald Isle, North Carolina. Both of my businesses keep me in close contact with vacationers who travel here from every state in the Union. How do I know this? Well, I have a map in my donut store and my customers pin their hometowns. My last holdout was the state of Wyoming, and when a customer pinned Rawlins, a town just north of the state's shared border with Colorado, I asked to see the customer's driver's license. One of my favorite responsibilities as a donut shop owner and a real estate broker is to answer questions asked by my vacationers. Questions about Emerald Isle, questions about the Crystal Coast, what to do, where to eat, where to live, and so on. In normal times, these questions have multiple answers. But in these times of COVID-19 and soft reopenings of the economy, answers to these questions are far more difficult. For example, as of this recording, the North Carolina Aquarium at Pine Knoll Shores remains closed, as are the exhibits, the fort, and the visitors center at Fort Macon. The Cape Lookout Visitor Centers, all ranger-led programs, all guided tours, and the Lighthouse climbing season, originally set to open on Wednesday, May 13th, are all suspended until further notice. Many restaurants remain closed or have limited service options. Of course, schedules are changing daily, and tomorrow my answers likely will be different. So what activities do remain available to our vacationers visiting the Crystal Coast? Of course, we have our beaches, 13 miles of wide, expansive beaches where it is quite easy to practice social distancing. The water temperature is perfect for bathing and swimming, and you can also walk for miles without any noisy interruptions, save those from the many gulls. When you want to escape the beach, you can always walk on the Emerald Isle Pathway that begins at the eastern border of Emerald Isle with Indian Beach and continues west to the point where the island meets the Bogue Inlet. This same pathway is available to cyclists too. And now that I've managed to bring cycling into this video, you should know that cycling is my third passion here on the Crystal Coast. I started out on balloon-tired beach bikes, riding the beach at low tide with my two daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret. As they aged out of this activity, I started riding what I called my 10-speed on Emerald and Ocean drives. Over the years, I increased my mileage, riding to Indian Beach, to the North Carolina Aquarium, and eventually riding all the way to Fort Macon. Later still, I completed several circuits of Bogue Banks, leaving my home on Live Oak and riding east to Fort Macon, and then riding west to the point before returning to my home. Whew! A circuit of more than 50 miles. A couple of times I even left my home and cycled west on Emerald Drive and pedaled over the first of two bridges to the mainland, where I made a right turn on Highway 24. I cruised through Cape Carteret, Newport, and Bogue, and continued east until I reached Morehead City. I cycled over the second of two bridges on this route into Atlantic Beach. Back on Bogue Banks, I'd continue riding west until I reached my home in Emerald Isle. A number of years ago, I retired my 10-speed upright bicycle, and today I ride a recumbent bicycle, and I ride this bicycle even further distances. One of my favorite circuits is to ride to Harker's Island. My 63-mile circuit, also known as a Metric 100, follows the route taken by riders of the Biking the Banks event. The event, of course, was canceled this year and is usually scheduled for the first Saturday in May. The route follows fairly flat terrain. The only hill is the North River Bridge connecting the historic city of Beaufort to down east. Strong coastal winds sometimes present a minor challenge. I call these headwinds the invisible mountains. Sometimes, however, these coastal winds shift direction and become tailwinds, propelling you rapidly along your route. Harkers Island itself is about 4 square miles, with much of it being water. The town is made for tourists who love adventure and history. Prior to the first European explorers arriving in the 1500s, Harkers Island was home to Native Americans, members of the Cree tribe. Once the Crystal Coast region became colonized, the island was given to a native of the New Carolina colony, his name being Farnefold Green, back in 1707. He was given this land by the Lords Proprietor, the original governing body for the Carolina colony. The island in turn was sold to Ebenezer Harker in 1730, who settled on the island with his family. He built a boatyard as well as a plantation. After his death, the island, which had been alternatively known as Davers Isle and Craney Island, was renamed Harkers Island. Regardless of the name, the island remained relatively deserted for more than a century. Harkers Island increased its population when a rash of hurricanes forced residents of Diamond City, located on Shackleford Banks, to locate there in the late 1800s. From this point on, the island became home to a mixed population of mariners, fishermen, decoy artists, and hunters, as well as other folks who made their living on this inner Banks Island. A post office for Harkers Island was officially established in 1904, and paved roads made an appearance in the area in 1936. Despite these advancements and a new wave of interest from second homeowners and retirees in the late 20th century, the island has retained a small town feel throughout the generations, an atmosphere that continues today. I'm telling you all this because Harkers Island is a great place to visit, even in these days of social distancing. While you cannot yet climb the 207 steps to the top of Cape Lookout Lighthouse, you can go shelling at the Cape Lookout National Seashore. And while the Core Sound Waterfowl Museum remains closed, you can experience the beauty of the maritime forest on a hiking adventure at the Willow Pond Trail, located adjacent to the museum. You can also take a ferry ride to Shackleford Banks to catch a glimpse of the famous wild horses that roam the island. If you are so ambitious to ride your bicycle to Harkers Island, look out for a rider on a black recumbent bicycle. If that cyclist has a beaming smile, chances are that cyclist will be me. Hail me down and let's chat about our shared passions for the Crystal Coast. Until then, stay safe and stay well, and return next week to the same bat channel at the same bat time of 9 a.m. on Thursday for another episode of Emerald Isle Vacation Home Specialist.